Order, please. We'll now begin with the daily routine, beginning with presenting and reading of petitions, presenting reports of committees, tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my capacity as Minister of Justice for Nova Scotia, I hereby beg leave to table the 2018-2019 Electoral Boundaries Commission final report, Balancing Effective Representation with Voter Parity, dated April 2019, which was filed with the Chief Clerk of the House of Assembly on April 15, 2019.
The report is tabled. Statements by ministers. Government notices of motion. The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here we give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian Cadet Corps program has been offering training and leadership development to young Canadians, teaching life and work skills since the late 1800s, and whereas Nova Scotia has 85 cadet units and over 3,000 cadets active in Air, Sea, Army, and Navy units who are involved in their communities through volunteering and citizenship activities and making a significant contribution to Canadian society. And whereas Cadet Day was made an official act by the Nova Scotia Legislature in 2010 and is celebrated to recognize these youth and their contributions to the province, therefore, it be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly recognize October 5th, 2019 as Cadet Day in the province of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye. Aye. Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on August 1st to 3rd, Antigonish successfully hosted the 55-plus senior games with more than 700 participants. And whereas participation in these games afforded the athletes with a great example of how important and fun it is to stay engaged and active as we age. And whereas the 55-plus senior games align with and help advance the goals of SHIFT, Nova Scotia's action plan for aging population. Therefore, it be it resolved the members of the House of Assembly join me in congratulating the organizing committee and all the participating athletes, including the member from Kings West, who won a gold medal playing for the South Shore men's hockey team, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye. Aye. Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby move on a future date. I'll move the following notice of motion. Whereas the Mobius Awards Environmental Excellence recognize leaders in recycling and waste diversion across the province, and whereas this year's recipients include Michelin, the Woodville Farmers Market, Beyond Foods Inc. in Halifax, Be Amazed, Art Maze in Bridgewater, and the Sisters of St. Martha's in Antigonish. And whereas Dylan Yates of Glace Bay has been recognized as an emerging environmental leader, and Lise LeBlanc of Lower Sackville has been entered into the Mobius Awards Hall of Fame, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House recognize these Nova Scotians for their leadership and commitment to protecting our environment. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? It is agreed. Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye. Aye. Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to make an introduction.
Permission granted.
Today in the East Gallery, we are joined by Danita Kerwin, mother, grandmother, and this year's Nova Scotia Council of the Federation Literacy Award recipient. I will be presenting her award today at 11:30 a.m. downstairs, and all members are invited. Danita always cared for her family, and she started volunteering at a school in her community, and it became her personal goal to obtain her GED, which she did in March. She is now working as an education program assistant and volunteering as a tutor for other adult learners. Also in attendance today is Danita's spouse, Robert Cameron, and I'd like to ask them to stand to receive the warm welcome of the House.
Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Council of the Federation Literacy Award is presented annually to adult learners across the country who demonstrate an exceptional commitment to literacy, and whereas Danita Kerwin, the winner of the 2019 Nova Scotia Council of the Federation Literacy Award, is setting a positive example for her grandchildren while making a difference in her community, and whereas Danita's strength and resilience are admirable and her journey is an inspiration to all adult learners. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this legislature congratulate Danita on her continued success and wish her all the best in the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? It is agreed. With all those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Saturday, October 5th is World Teachers' Day, which provides an opportunity to recognize the teaching profession. And whereas Nova Scotia has more than 9,000 teachers who do important work to support over 120,000 students each year, and whereas through their commitment and service, teachers are helping to prepare young people to be future leaders in our communities and successful in their own lives, therefore be it resolved that all members of this legislature recognize Saturday, October 5th as World Teachers' Day, and to also recognize the difference that teachers make in the lives of our young people each and every day. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? It is agreed. With all those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I make an introduction?
Permission granted.
Draw your members' attention to the East Gallery, where we're joined by Josie Ryan, the Executive Director of Long-Term Care at Northwood and also Chair of the Health Association of Nova Scotia Continuing Care Council, and Janet Sim, the President and CEO of Northwood Long-Term Care. If you please rise, receive the warm welcome of the Legislature.
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotians deserve to be comfortable and well taken care of in their home or in long-term care, and whereas there are so many continuing care assistants, nurses, physicians, family caregivers, and volunteers who provide compassionate care to Nova Scotians, and whereas October is Continuing Care Month, a time to thank the dedicated people working in long-term care, home care, and supporting Nova Scotians and communities across the province, therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House recognize the remarkable difference those working and volunteering in continuing care make for people in care. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waivers. Is it agreed? It is agreed. With all those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. We'll now move on to introduction of bills. The Honourable Minister of Energy and Mines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to make an introduction before
Permission granted.
I just want to recognize, too, she was just recognized here, but my Aunt Josie is here today, Josie Ryan. So I just want to thank her for keeping me out of trouble. And she's been a big part of my life growing up. So, Josie, good to see you. Yeah.
The Honourable Minister of Mines and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 32 of the Acts of 2015, the Marine Renewable Energy Act.
The Honourable Minister of Energy and Mines begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 32 of the Acts of 2015, the Marine Renewable Energy Act.
Bill number 175, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 32 of the Acts of 2015, the Marine Renewable Energy Act.
Ordered that this bill be read a second time on a future day. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I make an introduction?
Permission granted.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to draw the members' attention to the gallery opposite, where today we have in the gallery, I'd like to welcome Annette Harpel of Antigonish, Larry Haven of Halifax, and Judy Haven of Halifax. Mr. Haven is a member of Equity Watch, a diverse group of concerned citizens campaigning to make Nova Scotia governments and employers more accountable concerning workplace bullying, harassment, and discrimination. After a long struggle as the result of a workplace bullying, Mrs. Harpel has been working with Equity Watch to ensure that Nova Scotia's occupational health and safety laws protect people from psychological harassment at work. Please welcome me in welcoming them to the House. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of the House.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 7 of the Acts of 1996, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, respecting mental health.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 7 of the Acts of 1996, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, respecting mental health.
Bill number 176, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 7 of the Acts of 1996, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, respecting mental health.
Ordered that this bill be read a second time on a future day. The Honourable Minister of Energy and Mines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 380 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Utilities Act.
The Honourable Minister of Energy and Mines begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 380 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Utilities Act.
Bill number 177, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 380 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Utilities Act.
Ordered that this bill be read a second time on a future day. The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 12 of the Acts of 2011, the Public Procurement Act, respecting fair wages and community benefits.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 12 of the Acts of 2011, the Public Procurement Act, respecting fair wages and community benefits.
Bill number 178, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 12 of the Acts of 2011, the Public Procurement Act, respecting fair wages and community benefits.
Ordered that the bill be read a second time on a future day. Well, now, the Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 226 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Industry Closing Act.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 226 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Industry Closing Act.
Bill number 179, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 226 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Industry Closing Act.
Ordered that this bill be read a second time on a future day. We'll now move on to notices of motion. Statements by members. The Honourable Member for Sydney Whitney Pier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday was Radio Day in Cape Breton, put on by the Cape Breton Regional Hospital Foundation and hundreds of volunteers across our community. Yesterday, Cape Bretoners raised money to support cancer care in Cape Breton. Hundreds of volunteers were involved. We've seen a number of businesses step forward. We've seen youth raise over $10,000 to support the fundraising drive. Overall, Mr. Speaker, yesterday, Cape Bretoners raised over $1 million for cancer care at home. So, Mr. Speaker, I rise in my place to congratulate Brad Jacobs and his team at the Cape Breton Regional Hospital Foundation, the hundreds of volunteers that were involved, and most importantly, all of the donors that raised over $1 million in our community. Cape Bretoners are excited about the work that the foundation does, and they always step forward to support cancer care at home. And as a government, we look forward to the next step, which is building a new cancer centre for Cape Breton.
The honourable member for Colchester Musquedobbit Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to commend Ledwidge Lumber Company in Enfield on the establishment of an annual scholarship in memory of company founder Laurie Ledwidge. The scholarship will typically be awarded to someone who displays an entrepreneurial spirit or a passion for giving back to the community. Jim Ledwidge, Laurie's son, states that his father admired anyone who has the ambition to get ahead in life and the willingness to work for it. Such is the case with the first recipient, Ashley Hart, who has a passion for nursing and are pursuing post-secondary education in that field. Congratulations to Ashley on her scholarship. Best wishes to her in her chosen career path. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate and encourage the students of St. Margaret's Bay Elementary who will participate this afternoon in a walk, run, or roll event as part of the Let's All Move as One activity for World Cerebral Palsy Day. The official date for World CP is this Sunday, October 6th. This year, the Cerebral Palsy International Sport and Recreation Association is promoting the benefits of sport and physical activity on the quality of life for people with CP. Today, the students of St. Margaret's Bay Elementary will walk, run, or roll for 30 minutes wearing their favorite green attire, like I am today, to support World Cerebral Palsy Day. Mr. Speaker, I invite all members of the House of Assembly to join me in congratulating the students and staff of St. Margaret's Bay Elementary for participating in this important event and showcasing the importance of physical activity for all citizens of Nova Scotia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate Jim Chisholm on his retirement. Jim was the superintendent of the town of Pictou Public Works for over 30 years before he retired on June 21st of this year. Jim's unwavering commitment to improving the town of Pictou has been greatly appreciated by the community and its leaders for the years he served our town. He was present to oversee various important events and infrastructure projects in our community. He certainly left a positive impact on the town of Pictou as it flourished into a bright little shire town. Thank you, Jim, for your years of service to the town of Pictou and for being a friend. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Queens Shelburne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to honour Donna Ruland, who sadly passed away on June 29th of this year. Today, Donna would have been celebrating her 62nd birthday. Donna was considered the Queen of Dock Street in Shelburne, where she worked at the Shelburne Barrel Factory for 41 years. She was the only known female cooper in the world. Donna loved meeting visitors from all over the world and was a great ambassador for Shelburne and for Nova Scotia. An animal lover, an avid gardener, she was a true character who will be sorely missed. Mr. Speaker, my thoughts go out to Donna's family and friends for their loss. I think it is safe to say that her memory will live on in the hearts of all those lives she touched. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Lunenburg.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the Mahone Bay Legion Hall, which was recently designated as an age-friendly facility. Being awarded this designation means that all of the standards set forth by the Nova Scotia Community Links Aging Well Together program have been met. Lloyd Westaver and Wade Rulin spearheaded the team of volunteers who over the past 3 years have worked hard to upgrade the facility, making it more accessible for seniors and those with disabilities. Some of the upgrades include wheelchair accessible bathrooms, improvements to signage around the building, painting and extended handrails. Mahone Bay Legion Branch 49 President Helen Whitehouse acknowledges the hard work it took to make the changes, but is pleased to be the first facility in Mahone Bay to receive this designation. Mr. Speaker, I would ask that you and the members of this House of Assembly join me in congratulating the Mahone Bay Legion Hall on receiving the age-friendly facility designation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow, October 5th, marks World Teachers' Day. It's important to celebrate the teachers in our province. From elementary, junior high, and high school, we are so lucky to have the determined, caring, and compassionate teachers in Nova Scotia. As a parent, my mind is at ease knowing my children are in the care of awesome teachers all day. As an educator, I'm proud of the work being done by my former colleagues in classrooms across Nova Scotia. We all know, Mr. Speaker, a positive learning experience with a teacher who takes the extra time and goes the extra mile can be the difference maker in a student's life. Mr. Speaker, let's say thanks to the teachers in our province today. I ask all members of this House to acknowledge the outstanding dedication, compassion, and professionalism of our teachers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South.
Mr. Speaker, on World Teacher Day, I would like to recognize the important work of Educators for Social Justice Nova Scotia. Founded in 2015, Educators for Social Justice is an independently organized caucus of Nova Scotia Teachers Union members and allies whose goal is to advocate for greater social justice in our schools and communities. Our caucus shares their vision of a robust, well-rounded public education system that supports social justice and actively challenges colonialism, racism, sexism, and all systems of oppression. ESJ is an excellent example of the important contributions that teachers make to our communities inside and outside of their classrooms. Mr. Speaker, I applaud them for their dedication in working towards a fairer, more equitable society for all.
The honourable member for Clare Digby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to add my voice to the recognition that JD Composites received this summer when they unveiled their house, the first house 100% constructed of plastic bottles. The partners Joel German and David Saunier have been discussing the project for 3 years. Mr. Saunier has a background in composites and boat building and wanted to use composites to build houses. Their house in Metagon River, an energy-efficient house that can withstand Category 5 hurricanes, was made using an estimated 612,000 plastic bottles. I was at the company's open house and don't think either men had foreseen the worldwide interest this one house would generate. Part of the reason for this interest is the use of hundreds of thousands of used plastic bottles needed to build a house. Plastic bottles that now may fill landfills as well as wash up on our shores. Also, this technology could be used to build smaller homes and disaster relief shelters. This shows that concrete ways to save the environment issues can sprout from any industry and be developed anywhere, including a beautiful village far from urban centres like Metagon River. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Sackville Beaverbank.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to acknowledge Taylor Moore and Kaylee Hoadley, two local students who were hired to work with us at our office over this past summer. Mr. Speaker, Taylor and Kaylee did a wonderful job helping my constituency assistant and myself by conducting critic research, answering calls, and helping constituents. Kaylee was a co-op student that was at our office from October 2018 to February 2019 and so impressed us with her abilities and work ethic that we decided to hire her as a full-time student over the summer. Taylor was a student who graduated from Avon View High School and is a hardworking and intelligent young woman who also joined our team over the summer. Both girls are now attending their first year at St. Mary's University, where Kaylee is taking a political science degree and Taylor is playing on the university's female rugby team. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to just take an opportunity to thank Taylor and Kaylee for their hard work and contributions to our office and my constituents over this past summer and wish them luck as they attend their first year university at SMU. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Preston Dartmouth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to recognize Ms. Pam Bouchard, who has donated 6 years tirelessly organizing and promoting the Lake Echo Terry Fox Run event. The 5 co-chairs of the organizing team have named her as the honorary chair and president for 2019 as a way of acknowledging her accomplishments. She's been retired for 10 years, yet gave selfishly of her time to make this Lake Echo's 39th annual Terry Fox Run an event of great success. I want to recognize and congratulate Ms. Pam Bouchard for her dedication to our community and the annual Terry Fox Walk Run event. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I rise to recognize Les and Nancy Rushton of Oxford. In 1969 and September 4th, they were married. Les and Nancy resided their whole lives in Oxford, and while operating their own machinery and welding business, they brought up three young men and a daughter. Mr. Speaker, this weekend I would like to congratulate 50th wedding anniversary to Les and Nancy Rushton, and I ask this House join me in celebration with my parents this coming weekend. Thank you.
The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I'm going to speak about a special lady in our community whose sole goal is to help young people. 25 years ago, when Sharon Press's son Daniel was 7 years old, he couldn't read. He had excellent teachers, but somehow just couldn't understand. Not finding the resources they needed here, Sharon took the remarkable step of taking Daniel to California to a renowned learning center. There he could receive the help he needed, and Sharon could get the training she needed to be able to teach him. This trip had an enormous impact on both their lives. Today, Sharon runs Foundations for Learning, tutoring children in math and reading comprehension. Foundations for Learning has grown from Sharon's one-man show to 2 locations with now 8 tutors. Sharon's determination to help her son has grown into a successful business, helping many children in our community and beyond. So I would like to ask members of this House to join me in thanking Sharon for her continued work in helping struggling youth to reach their potential. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Argyle-Barrington.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to congratulate Lenora Surratt of Abrams River, Nova Scotia, on being awarded the French Second Language Educator of the Year by Canadian Parents for French, Nova Scotia, on September 28, 2019. Lenora teaches grades 4 and 5 French immersion at Meadowfields Community School. She excels in French second language teaching and truly demonstrates innovation and initiative in her classroom. She strives to motivate her students to do their best and is a strong advocate of the French language and culture. Mr. Speaker, I ask all members to join me in congratulating Lenora Surratt on her award and thank her for her continued dedication to our education system. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Cape Breton-Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is with great pleasure that I rise today to extend best wishes to Erie Chat resident Leon Martel. Mr. Martel has battled kidney disease for many, many years, which severely affected his lifestyle, but never his sense of humor. Mr. Speaker, with so many Nova Scotians receiving dialysis, it is a miracle that Mr. Martel found his match and was able to receive his much-needed kidney. Mr. Speaker, on September 29th, Mr. Martel was told he would receive a kidney, and on September 30th, he became a successful recipient. I am very pleased to say that he is recuperating well with his wife Anne and friends and family, and when I asked if he had a message to share about this surreal experience, he asked that I say, in sign language, because both he and his wife Anne are hearing impaired, he asked for me to share, I love you. Mr. Speaker, the community of Isle Madame is extending their love, support, and best wishes to Leon, and I ask members of this House to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Mr. Speaker, like any mother, I found the return to work after maternity leave challenging. And after my second child, in fact, I did not return and began several years of juggling childcare with part-time gigs and freelance work. On the occasion of tomorrow's World Teacher Day, I want to salute Chrissy Can, the primary French immersion teacher at St. Joseph A. McKay School in my constituency. Last April, she returned from her second maternity leave to a special assignment. She stepped into an English grade 5-6 split class whose amazing teacher had had to go on leave after a personal tragedy. Ms. Can knew the students because she had visited the class regularly with her infant through the Roots of Empathy program. This was a very challenging return to work assignment, and Ms. Can rose to it with energy, commitment, and great affection for her grade 5 and 6 students. I join her colleagues and parents in the St. Joseph A. McKay community in recognizing Chrissy Can for her work, and I wish her a very good year back in her primary French immersion class. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Guysborough Eastern Shore, Tracadie.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in recognition of our local 4-H club. I had the pleasure of meeting some of these awesome kids, and no, not the billy goat kind, at an event this summer, although I did get to meet Root Beer, their goat. 4-H is an important program for our youth in our province and has been here since 1922 when the first 4-H club was organized. 4-H focuses on developing kids in leadership, taking care and responsibility for resources, building helpful life skills, and working towards a sustainable future for us all. The Manchester 4-H club keeps rabbits, chickens, goats, focusing on taking care of the animals to keep them healthy and hardy. Agriculture is an important part of our communities and economies in Nova Scotia, and I commend a new generation for taking an interest in farming, growing, and keeping animals, and for their learning how enriching a rural way of life can be. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the local 4-H club and leader Lorraine Breimer for participating in our community expo this past summer and wish them all the best for their future competitions and animal husbandry efforts. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to acknowledge the hard work and commitment put forth by Camp Aldershot during Hurricane Dorian. 150 personnel and 75 vehicles arrived in our area of Kings North to work on the restoration of power services in the local region. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank Camp Aldershot base staff for quartering and feeding these crews during their time here, and I'm sure their hospitality was very appreciated. Having somewhere for these crews to stay and be fed during this time certainly helped to get things up and running for those people who were without power. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax-Armdale.
Mr. Speaker, every day Nova Scotians impress me with their compassion. One great example is the selflessness exhibited by Wendy Jones of Armdale. Back in June, an electrical fire broke out in her neighbor's home, destroying the residence and possessions of the family of 7 living there. Though Wendy did not know the family, she felt for her neighbors and offered her assistance to them in the days following the fire. When a flyer she shared with her neighbors asking for donations was posted on Facebook, people across HRM were quick to lend their support. Indeed, she woke up the next day to hundreds of texts and emails offering help. Wendy spent weeks collecting and sorting donations of furniture, clothes, toys, even bicycles, and helped the family with their hunt for a new place to call home. I ask all members of the House of Assembly to join me in thanking Wendy for her actions and generosity. Thank you.
The honourable member for Sydney River Myra Lewisburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to congratulate the Homeville Women's Institute of Port Morion on their donation of head coverings, which are available at the Cape Breton Cancer Centre. The members began this project 3 months ago, and since then have made over 250 covering, which are made for women battling cancer and going through treatment. This idea was brought forward to the group by a friend of the late Judy McLeod, who recently passed away from cancer. In turn, her family donated the fabric for the project. It's a true honor to stand here today and take this opportunity to congratulate the Homeville Women's Institute and their members on their dedication to such a meaningful project and continued community involvement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cole Harbour, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to acknowledge the sporting achievements of a constituent of Cole Harbour, Portland Valley in the National Mixed Pairs Lawn Bowling Tournament recently held in Saskatoon. Constituent Debbie Tower, with just 6 years' experience in the sport, and her lawn bowling partner, Kevin Colby, who has 3 years' experience, played against teams with international status in the sport, while proudly representing Nova Scotia in the event. Many of the teams had up to 40 years' experience, but that didn't stop Kevin or Debbie from becoming strong challengers throughout the tournament. They won 2 of their games, both of which were played against veteran teams. They placed 9th overall in the tournament, and while they both acted as great ambassadors for Nova Scotia, many of the tournament players expressed interest in coming to visit Nova Scotia. In fact, several teams and members have already visited due to Debbie's ambassadorship. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank Debbie and Kevin for their great ambassadorship for Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Cumberland North.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to acknowledge Dylan Marshall. He is a 12-year-old boy from Amherst. This young man started up his own bakery business called Dylan's Delicious Delectables. During the summer, every Friday morning, he set up in front of his home to sell baked goods. And this summer, he helped to raise over $400 to send 3 children to YMCA day camp. This was done through a campaign by local business, ARC Social Media. He was able to accomplish this goal in just a few hours. Today, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank Dylan, who has a very generous heart in helping other children in his community. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to applaud 14 Wing Greenwood on hosting another successful Wing Welcome. Over the course of 5 days in September, 14 Wing Greenwood welcomed new military families and those who have relocated to the community through hosting a multitude of events and activities, all while enabling residents to become familiar with what the community has to offer. Popular events included a family movie, bowling, the Terry Fox Run, and much more. Many families appreciate the opportunity to meet volunteers associated with various sports and recreation clubs to find out more information or even sign up on the spot. All in all, it is a wonderful opportunity for the community to come together, get to know their neighbours, and promote community engagement that extends beyond the base. Mr. Speaker, I would request the members of the House of Assembly join me in thanking 14 Wing Greenwood on hosting yet another important Wing Welcome that fostered a strong sense of community spirit and feeling of warm welcome to all in attendance.
The honourable member for Northside Westmount.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to send best wishes to CBRM Councillor Clarence Prince as he begins treatment to fight a recent cancer diagnosis. Clarence is no stranger to the Northside Westmount. Previously serving as mayor of Sydney Mines, he has since been a long-time councillor for many years. He has spent the majority of his life serving our community and working to make our lives better. So it is in this moment, it is our opportunity to come together and do what we can to support Clarence Prince and his family. The entire community is keeping him and his family in our thoughts and prayers as he undergoes this battle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to recognize a special group of community-minded and highly motivated volunteers from the Prospect Road communities. Under the leadership of Maureen Yeadon, Frank Johnston, Bob Dooley, and Shirley Jollymore have teamed up with provincial and municipal offices through the assistance of my constituency office to spearhead a beautification project. The project is designed to enhance and beautify the appearance of the industrial development that has evolved in the Goodwood area. Recognizing that Goodwood is the access point that leads to our picturesque coastal communities and our most iconic tourist attraction, Peggy's Cove, this community group is working to provide a more welcoming and inviting experience for the hundreds of tourists and residents that pass by this location every day by diminishing the sightline of the industrial businesses in the area. In addition to enhancing the appearance of this area, the committee is developing a rest area along the active transportation lanes that have been installed by the province this year. I ask the members of the House to join me in thanking Maureen Yeadon, Frank Johnston, Bob Dooley, and Shirley Jollymore for their dedication to the community and for their recognition of the importance of our province's growing tourist industry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Inverness.
Mr. Speaker, congratulations to Ms. Emily McKay of East Margaree, who recently graduated from the nursing program at St. FX University. She won the University Gold Medal for the highest average in the final 3 years of an honours advanced major degree program. Mr. Speaker, these are the kinds of hardworking Nova Scotians we know will bring the best of care for those among us who are sick or experiencing discomfort. Let us acknowledge Emily for her achievement and wish her a rewarding and successful career here in her home province. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Fairview Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize an incredible young resident from Fairview. Molly Nichols, a Pathfinder guide, traveled to Switzerland and the UK with the Halifax South District Girl Guide group this summer. As a part of the travel plans, Molly visited the Girl Guides chalet in Switzerland. While there, she met other like-minded youth from across the world and participated in many activities and adventures. During the second half of her trip, Molly stayed at the Pax Lodge in London and participated in a week-long event called The Journey Through London. The purpose of this event was for the Girl Guides to discover London, participate in a community service project, and to celebrate the international spirit of guiding and scouting. Mr. Speaker, I ask that the members of this House join me in wishing Molly the best in all of her future endeavours. I'm sure this is just a glimpse of what is yet to come. Thank you.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to applaud HRM Deputy Mayor Councillor Tony Mancini. During Hurricane Dorian and its aftermath, Deputy Mayor Councillor Tony Mancini showed tremendous leadership by keeping the residents of the Halifax Regional Municipality apprised of storm warnings, closures, and general information leading up to and during the storm. Following the storm, he visited the communities and the homes of those residents who were affected in order to see firsthand the damage. Mr. Speaker, I would like all members of the House to join me to take this opportunity to compliment Deputy Mayor Tony Mancini for his efforts in keeping the residents of the Halifax Regional Municipality informed of Hurricane Dorian's impacts before, during, and after its journey through HRN. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to congratulate Wellington's Inner Strength Taekwondo Club on its success at the 2019 Pan Am Taekwondo Championships held in Oregon. Mr. Speaker, the club members brought home 4 medals. Katie Cox won the silver. Jaden and Katie Bartlett both won gold, and Raya Porter, who won gold in the open portion of the competitions. Congratulations to these athletes and the club for sending 4 athletes to the Pan Am Games and to the success of the Games. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to welcome 12 Wing Commander Colonel James Hawthorne. In 1994, Colonel Hawthorne enrolled in the Canadian Armed Forces. After attaining a bachelor's degree of civil engineering from the Royal Military College of Canada, he went on to earn his wings. Colonel Hawthorne completed an aerospace systems course in Winnipeg, Manitoba, before he came to Shearwater, eventually being seconded as the Wing Commander's executive assistant. In 2016, he was promoted to colonel. Colonel Hawthorne was then posted to Toronto, where he completed the National Securities Program from the Canadian Forces College. I ask all members of the Nova Scotia Legislature to join me in welcoming Colonel Hawthorne to his newly appointed position at 12 Wing Commander and celebrating his return to Shearwater, Nova Scotia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize and congratulate the Hooked Rug Museum of North America on their 7th successful year of operation in Queensland, Nova Scotia. Suzanne Conrad, founding director of the Hooked Rug Museum, declared that to celebrate their lucky 7th anniversary, the museum would host not just 1, but 3 Artists of the Year to showcase during the 2019 season. Ruth Downing of Nova Scotia and Jackie Shepherd-Alcock of Newfoundland and Labrador were designated as the Canadian Artists of the Year. Bridget Webb of Dingwall in the Scottish Highlands was named the International Artist of the Year. If you visit this wonderful Hooked Rug Museum, you will find on display carefully saved and preserved examples of rug hooking, which has evolved over the centuries in North America from utilitarian craft to fine art. Mr. Speaker, I invite the members of the House of Assembly to join me in recognizing and congratulating Suzanne Conrad, founding director, on the 7th anniversary of the Hooked Rug Museum of North America. Thank you.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to applaud Ari Shop and Brock Founds of Bedeck, who continue to show their passion and athleticism in track and field. Both men competed in the 2019 55-plus Games Nova Scotia Provincial Meet in Antigonish on August 2nd. Ari competed in the 65 to 70 age category, while Brock was in the 70 to 75 division. Ari won 6 medals, gold in 200-meter, 400-meter, 800-meter, and 1,500-meter races, and silver in the 5,000-meter and 4x100 relay. Brock won 5 medals, 3 gold, 1 silver, 1 bronze in race and field events. He also won gold in shot put and discus, silver in the 4x100 relay, and bronze in the 100-meter dash. Mr. Speaker, I ask all members of the House to join me in congratulating Ari and Brock on their accomplishments and for remaining ever young. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Mr. Speaker, many people's plans needed to change after Hurricane Dorian set its sights on us, and indeed across Nova Scotia, many people are still looking forward to a return to normal. The Kidney Walk, a fundraiser for the Kidney Foundation, was scheduled to happen on September 6th in Port Hawkesbury, Sydney, and in Halifax, and of course had to be postponed. Halifax's Kidney Walk will happen tomorrow in DeWolf Park in Bedford. It is largely organized by Rena Davis, a kidney recipient, a volunteer with the Kidney Foundation, and my constituency assistant. This is an important occasion to raise awareness and funds, and for those affected by kidney disease to come together. I appreciate Rena's great energy and efforts and wish all who will be walking well. Thank you.
The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Mr. Speaker, I recently asked people in the Spryfield, Sambor Loop, and Purcell's Cove community to put forward names of individuals or organizations they felt deserved recognition in the Nova Scotia legislature. Lots of names were put forward, but one kept coming up: Doug Garrison. Doug lives in Sambor with his wife Jackie and has three adult children, Stephen, Cindy, and Terry. Doug made a living in the fishing industry where he owned Sambor Fisheries. He employed many people in the community, and I even once baited trawl for him. Doug is retired, but that hasn't stopped him. Doug is active in the local church. He's raised funds to make the church accessible. He's raised money to keep a historic cemetery open, and he's constantly volunteering, even singing once in a while. Doug is part of the backbone of Sambor, one of the most beautiful communities in all of Nova Scotia. Doug is a role model and someone I go to for advice. Thank you, Doug, for all you do.
The honourable member for Dartmouth East on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the West Gallery, we have 22 students from the grade 12 global politics class at Prince Andrew High School. With them today, Mr. Speaker, are two outstanding teachers, Miss Adrienne Glasgow and Mr. Ben Seychelle. I had the honor of working with these two outstanding professionals for many years at Prince Andrew High School. I'll ask all the students to please stand and their teachers and receive the warm welcome of the House of Assembly.
The honourable member for Pictou Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I know you are sports enthusiasts and recognize talent when you see it. I would like all members of the House of Assembly to congratulate Guy Pellerine, a former power-hitting shortstop at the Pictou County Albions, who was inducted into the Nova Scotia Intermediate Baseball League Hall of Fame during their championship tournament weekend on August 31st. Guy was a threat to go deep anytime he came to the plate. He was an all-star for the majority of years he played in the league and anchored a deep infield that took the Albions to 3 consecutive AAA provincial titles. A gentleman off and on the field, he played with intensity 100% of the time. He supported an impressive lifetime average, and his power and numbers were incredible. He was definitely a class act. Congratulations, Guy Pellerine, on your induction into the Nova Scotia Intermediate Baseball League's Hall of Fame. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Lunenburg.
Mr. Speaker, in honour of Seniors Week, I felt it fitting to recognize Lunenburg's Mayor, Rachel Bailey, and her accomplishments at the 55-plus Games hosted this past summer in Antigonish. The 55-plus Games are a great way to engage seniors, or as they are referred to as seasoned citizens, from age 55 upwards in a variety of mental and physical activities that encourage staying active. Mayor Rachel Bailey competed in a variety of races, receiving a gold in the 200-metre dash, 400-metre run, and the 1,500-metre run. She also received a silver in her 100-metre dash. As a member of the 4x100-metre relay team, Rachel received another gold medal. Mr. Speaker, I would ask that you and the members of this House of Assembly join me in recognizing Mayor Rachel Bailey for her accomplishments in the 55-plus Games and for being a positive role model for living an active lifestyle. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Queen Shelburne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize George and Beerta Van de Meer, the new owners of the Shelburne Barrel Factory, which is located on Shelburne's historic waterfront. The Van de Meers have undertaken the renovation of this treasured building, being mindful to preserve the traditional appearance of the factory, which was built in 1917. After having it propped up on I-beams to install a concrete foundation, they then worked on a new wooden floor and roofing and have reconfigured the interior so that visitors can watch the barrel makers at work. And many more improvements are planned. Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate the Van de Meers and all those involved in this very worthwhile project. They have indeed given the Shelburne Barrel Factory a new lease on life. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax-Chebucto.
Mr. Speaker, has the time for member statements elapsed?
Pretty much.
I wish to move a motion that the business of the House be set aside for the purpose of discussing a matter of urgent public importance under Rule 43(1) of the Rules and Forms of Procedure of the House of Assembly, which matter is the closure of the Boat Harbour Effluent Treatment Facility. This is a matter of urgent importance as per the following reasons. 1. As per the Boat Harbour Act, quote, on and after the earlier of January 31st, 2020, and the date on which the Northern Pulp Nova Scotia Corporation ceases to use the Boat Harbour Effluent Treatment Facility, the use of the Boat Harbour Effluent Treatment Facility for the reception and treatment of effluent from the Northern Pulp Mill must cease, unquote. 2. At present, it is unlikely that Northern Pulp can meet the January 31st, 2020 deadline and maintain operations. As a result, there is great uncertainty and tension in the province about what will happen with regards to the closure of the Boat Harbour Effluent Treatment Facility as outlined in the Act. 3. The focus report from Northern Pulp regarding the environmental assessment for the effluent plant, which will replace the Boat Harbour facility, released yesterday, October 3rd, 2019, outlines that a new effluent plant will take 21 months to build, taking us past the January 31st, 2020 deadline. 4. Given that there is a 30-day public comment period on the focus report, plus up to 39 days for the government to make its decision, there will not be an opportunity to discuss the impact of this process on the closure of the Boat Harbour Effluent Treatment Facility during the current sitting or before the January 31st, 2020 deadline. And 5, while there is legislation on the order paper regarding the future of the forestry industry if Northern Pulp were to close, there is no legislation addressing the closure of the Boat Harbour Effluent Treatment Facility on time as per the Act. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I have received the notice from the member for Halifax-Chebucto requesting the debate on a matter of urgent public importance yesterday evening, which is more than the 2 hours required before the start of today's sitting as required. Upon reviewing the notice, I have to say it's not clear to me what the emergency is. As the member notes, the House has passed a law that the Boat Harbour Act, in the Boat Harbour Act, that fixes the closing date for the facility. It is open to the member or any other member of this House to introduce a bill to change that date, but other than by legislation, the House is not in a position to change that date by way of emergency debate. I do not see what change could be carried out by the House having an emergency debate. Therefore, I will not allow this request for the emergency debate. We'll now move on to oral questions put by members to ministers, and I will add 3 minutes to the end of question period. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A week ago, my colleague from Northside Westmount asked the question about the crane that fell during Hurricane Dorian. We asked if there was a cost estimate for the potential liability. We accept that it's a moving target, but surely there's a range of even worst case, best case. There must be some range that the province could potentially be on the hook for. At some point, someone must have taken a look at the potential risks to the province. It's a week later. We're now into our second localized state of emergency. My question for the Premier is, does he have a cost estimate for the removal of the crane?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the Honourable for the question. He has highlighted the issue around the crane, which is a unique situation from Hurricane Dorian. Mr. Speaker, became apparent for the safety of the residents in that community that government step in, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that the safety of those residents was paramount, whether they were in the condo and those businesses, and to ensure that we could get that crane down as quickly as possible. The work is ongoing. You know, we've had two companies in that were strapped that crane to the existing building, and now we'll start the removal of the crane with the company that has been hired to do that.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question was about the cost estimate. Has the province done one, and can they share it with the House? This weekend, it will have been 4 weeks since Hurricane Dorian. Businesses and residents in the area of the collapsed crane they're running out of patience and they're looking for information. So far, we've heard that the Department of Labour and Advanced Education is responsible for the investigation into the collapse. The Emergency Management Office is responsible for the localized state of emergency. The Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal is responsible for the actual work of taking down the crane. Residents and businesses have been directed to their insurance companies by the Premier. The national government may step in if there's uninsurable losses, and EMO will administer that when the time comes. Mr. Speaker, is there a single point of contact people can reach out to if they have questions and concerns?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member raised the question. You know that the Minister of Labour and Advanced Education is responsible for safety in all work sites, Mr. Speaker. He's the regulator when it comes to ensuring whether it is this particular work site or any work site in our province is safe for workers, Mr. Speaker. You would also know that the state of emergency that would have been applied falls under the Emergency Measures Organization, Mr. Speaker, and the minister responsible for that would be the person that would execute that. And he would also know that the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal would be the person that would deal with the issues associated with the contracts related to taking down the crane. The reality of it is, Mr. Speaker, this is an unprecedented situation for the province. We are working with our partners. There was issues around the site, indemnifying that site. We believe it is in the best interest and the safety of Nova Scotians to respond, and we're continuing to make sure, and I look forward to that street and that community getting back to normal.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, it reminds me of public accounts when it used to meet on a regular basis, and we might have a topic of health in there. We'd have Nova Scotia Health Authority, we'd have the Department of Health, probably Doctors Nova Scotia, the college, be transportation. When you ask a question, everyone looks at each other because nobody wants to feel accountable and responsible. And in this situation, we have 4 ministers who are responsible, and everyone knows what happens when 4 ministers are responsible. Nobody's responsible. My question for the Premier is, if there are massive cost overruns or other issues, when we're looking back in 6 months, who should we ask them to? Who should we hold accountable for getting this done and getting it done right?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the honourable member for the question. I also want to thank Nova Scotians for giving us the privilege to govern for the last 6 years. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind the honourable member when we came in, Mr. Speaker, we had a $500 million hole annually in the finances of this province. We are delivering our 4th balanced budget. We will deliver our 5th, Mr. Speaker. We will cover the costs associated with ensuring our communities are safe. At the same time, investing, Mr. Speaker, more young people are finding a future for themselves in this province. Our population is at an all-time high. The average age is going down, Mr. Speaker. We're seeing the economy grow, Mr. Speaker. We're the largest growing economy, Mr. Speaker, in Atlantic Canada. And we're going to continue, Mr. Speaker, to make sure we grow this province, Mr. Speaker, in a positive way. They can continue to be pessimistic about the future of the province. We're optimistic.
The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Mr. Speaker, at this very hour, members of the Pictou Landing First Nation are gathering with their supporters and friends at the band office to walk together the kilometre to the bridge in solidarity and hope for the closing on deadline of Boat Harbour. In the documentary, There's Something in the Water, Michelle Frances Denny speaks of the sorrow her family and community have endured over Boat Harbour for 52 years, and she says, "Everybody has to believe in something. I believe in January 31st, 2020, sake." Now, on Tuesday, I asked the Premier to reaffirm that belief, And the answer he provided was not the unequivocal affirmation that the people of Pictou Landing are seeking. So I ask him again, will he say plainly that not one drop of effluent will flow into Boat Harbour after January 31st next year?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the honourable member for the question. I also want to recognize, Mr. Speaker, the people of Pictou Landing who have been tremendous, Mr. Speaker, in dealing with this issue that is now decades old, Mr. Speaker. There's a piece of legislation that has been passed in this House unanimously that has that closing on the 31st of 2020, Mr. Speaker, and there's no other piece of legislation here to change that.
The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Mr. Speaker, 1,607 days ago, the Boat Harbour Act was passed with all party support. And in the course of the debate about that legislation, the current Minister of Labour and Advanced Education said on the government's behalf, "We believe that 5 years is a reasonable time to close Boat Harbour," and I will table the answer of his remarks. And yet here we are, with Northern Pulp's focus report released yesterday, with hardly any closer to a real solution. Well, I want to ask the Premier, if his government believed 5 years was a reasonable time frame to get this done, why, with just 119 days left now before the deadline, is the whole Northern Pulp situation a matter of such uncertainty and anxiety and pressure?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, one of the challenges facing with the issue is for decades, Mr. Speaker, successive governments continue to be a moving target when it came to the mill and to Boat Harbour. This House has put together a piece of legislation that was passed with a deadline in it. The mill has the responsibility to look for an EA, Mr. Speaker. That is before the regulator. It has nothing to do with me. If he wants to know the length of time the mill is taking to get in, that's a question for the mill operator. The reality of it is, I've made a commitment to clean up Boat Harbour. We've set aside money to finance the cleanup of Boat Harbour, Mr. Speaker, and we will do so.
The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, finally this week, after all this time, an application for environmental approval was received from the company. And yesterday it became available for public scrutiny, and as has been suspected all along, it says there it is not possible to build a new facility in 4 months. It says, in fact, that it'll take 21 months for the facility's construction. And so, Mr. Speaker, at this moment, two paths are diverging. One where the Boat Harbour effluent facility stays open, and one where it is closed. In addition to the people of Pictou Landing, thousands of people who work in the woods and in this mill and other mills and on the water and who live in the rest of the communities of Pictou County and beyond are looking to the Premier in this moment, not for an evasion or a bureaucratic diversion or for a shrug, but for leadership towards an honourable resolution of this situation. What does the Premier have to offer?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, again, I want to thank the honourable member for his question. He would know there's a regulator in this province, Mr. Speaker, that deals with environmental assessments. That is not the Premier. The honourable member know that. The company, like every company who wants an environmental assessment in this province, has a responsibility to do the work to ensure that it goes to the regulator. They'll assess it. They'll base the facts on science, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member would know there was one put in before that was rejected by the regulator. I have no idea what the regulator will do with this piece of information. They are working to put it together, but it will be based on the facts around science, Mr. Speaker. That's what will take place.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday I asked the Premier if he had received a report from the NSLC on the first phase of cannabis retail. This is a report that the Minister of Finance had previously said would identify best practices and what the government could or maybe should do differently on the cannabis file. So it sounds like this was a pretty consequential report, particularly as the legalization of cannabis edibles gets closer. Yesterday, the Premier didn't sound too concerned about the fact the government hadn't received this report almost 3 months after it was expected. My question for the Premier is, has his government followed up with the NSLC on why the cannabis retail report, the Phase 1 report, promised months ago, has not been received?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance is responsible for the Nova Scotia Liquor Commission, has been in constant contact with the distributor, Mr. Speaker. The reality is what we have said from the very beginning when this product became legal, we were going to ensure that distribution was held tight by the government. That's why we've chosen the vehicle of the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation to distribute that product. What we also said is that we would look at other opportunities for retailing later on. As the honourable member would know, we've been delayed with the edibles. Now that is coming this year. It was supposed to be done a few months ago. That was delayed. We're trying to find out from the National Health Organization which products will actually be made available. That doesn't mean, Mr. Speaker, that we're going to agree to sell all of those in our province. What we have made sure is, Mr. Speaker, that the distribution product will be held tight by our regulator, by our utility, and we will ensure that as we go forward, Mr. Speaker. And I will say, as other provinces are having to adjust how they've been distributing that product in the last number of months, the province of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, has stayed steady and committed to our distributors.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I appreciate the Premier's commitment to the distribution channel, but presumably this report would have so much more in that about what went right, what went wrong. Could be around staff training, could be around packaging, could be around marketing. There could be so many things in that report, and I know the Premier said yesterday that he fully understands what is happening in the cannabis marketplace, but the fact of the matter is it's not possible to fully understand what's happening unless you receive and review the report from the people who are selling it at the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation. This is an important piece of the puzzle, and I'd like to ask the Premier, does the Premier feel that Nova Scotians have a right to see this report, digest this report, understand this report, and understand the conclusions of the report? And if so, when he finally gets around to getting the report, will we table it for this House?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for the question. Again, Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure where the Leader of the Conservative Party is going. The reality of it is, Mr. Speaker, many of the things he referred to are actually rooted in regulation when it comes to the packaging. Mr. Speaker, we were in control of distribution. We made sure, Mr. Speaker, that we would control that distribution in a safe manner. It was about protecting our kids, Mr. Speaker. It's why the Minister of Finance and the Minister responsible for the NSLCs reached out to the national government, the health organization, to find out what are they doing around the distribution of that product, what products are going to come online. That does not mean we'll sell them all. We want to make sure that what we put in our stores, Mr. Speaker, is done so in an environment that is protecting the youth of this province, Mr. Speaker, as we all begin to experience what it's like, Mr. Speaker, to have this product just become legal within inside of Canada, and we're going to continue to make sure that we work with our regulator. And if there are any changes associated with that, Mr. Speaker, we'd be more than happy to tell Nova Scotia to end this House.
The Honourable House Leader for the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Education. In response to a Freedom of Information request, we've learned that as recently as last year, the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal was using a manual for school site selection that was last updated in 1999. The correspondence in the FOI reveals a general state of confusion about how to proceed with new school builds. A February 2019 email from the Director of Education Facilities Project Services says, TIR will assist in any way we can, but need to have direction on the general area within which we are to search for an appropriate site. Mr. Speaker, will the minister commit to tabling a new school site selection process before the end of this sitting?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Of course, I'm happy to do that. And as I've mentioned before, the new site selection process is going to help us streamline this so we don't have schools built late and can mitigate risks of having extensions to the construction season. We want to make sure that we focus on the technical evaluation first before we go to the community for feedback, because we don't believe it's fair, and it's also created some delays when the community is discussing sites that are potentially viable, Mr. Speaker. That's why we're doing the technical engineering evaluation first, and we do believe that this will help us improve that process to get our schools built on time for our communities.
The Honourable House Leader for the New Democratic Party.
I look forward to seeing the new process, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the same FOI package, there's an email about a meeting between staff from the Department of Education and TIR with the member for Bedford about the siting of a P-9 school. The email states, at the end of the conversation, the agreement was that we have two basic potential approaches. Mr. Speaker, can the minister confirm if the new school site selection process includes consultation with all MLAs or only members of the government caucus?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The new process will ensure public consultation at large. But again, and I can table a document that highlights the differences between the old process and the new and why we believe we can save some time. It's very practical, Mr. Speaker. Before we go to the community with potential sites, we want to make sure those sites are viable, that they're safe, and that we can service them with power, water, and busing routes before we engage the community on a conversation. That's the responsible, appropriate thing to do, and we believe that it can enhance this process and improve it to get our schools built more quickly and on time.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister responsible for the Public Utilities Act. We all know access to housing is a major issue impacting Metro and all of Nova Scotia. It's critical that steps are taken to ensure regulations do not restrict non-profit supportive housing from expanding. Government and their regulated utilities have a responsibility to consider their policies and eliminate all barriers and red tape for the development of non-profit supportive housing. In March of 2019, HRM voted to waive all municipal permit fees for non-profit supportive housing. My question for the Minister is this: has the Public Utilities Act been examined and thoroughly analyzed to ensure it does not create barriers for the development of supportive housing? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Mines and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for the question. What I can say is that in the department, we have taken a number of steps to encourage community housing to support the current stock that we have with our housing across the province. We're investing millions now in home efficiency to support them. We're supporting and looking at initiatives around community solar to drive those prices down, to give these community housing cooperatives the opportunity to benefit from not only energy efficiency, but to ensure that the residents can live more comfortably in their homes.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While I appreciate the Minister's response, I'd like to point out to the Minister when the award-winning Affirmative House, located in Dartmouth East, was developed in 2007, it was designed to help provide affordable, supportive housing for those battling mental health issues. It's located in Dartmouth's Main Street district. Since 2007, development permit fees in HRM have increased by 1,000%, and 70% of these development charges are being levied by Halifax Water. Mr. Speaker, these costs are a huge obstacle for affirmative ventures and their plans to expand more supportive housing. My question is this: will the Minister commit to examining the Public Utilities Act and consider making changes to regulations in order to allow discretion in waiving fees for non-profit supportive housing, just like HRM has? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Public Utilities Act.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, thank the honourable member for the question. I can assure the member and all members of this House that any initiatives that happen within this province, we are more than happy to sit down. You talked specifically about some projects in Dartmouth. More than happy, Mr. Speaker, to have a conversation with the member. Again, with our department looking at the utility and the rates and how they impact our communities, we're going to continue to expand programs. We're going to continue to look at ways that we can be more innovative to support these important community organizations that provide homes for our families. So thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Kings North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of TIR. Mr. Speaker, at the end of August, parts of Kings County experienced 6, possibly 7 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. The extreme rainfall event caused a lot of damage. Basements flooded, roads washed, and roadsides washed out. Many culverts washed out. 358 from Scotts Bay was the hardest hit, where numerous culverts were washed out and one culvert actually completely disappeared. The extreme rainfall exposed many weaknesses in our drainage system, and it's clear that many culverts need to be improved. My question, Mr. Speaker, for the Minister is, will the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal commit to replacing the inadequate and undersized culverts in Kings County?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question. Rain events tend to be very significant in terms of our infrastructure, and of course, we're very well aware of the extreme rain event that we experienced very recently. I want to again thank our people in the field who are working diligently to address these matters across the province. And in review of these kinds of activities, we're constantly looking at ways to improve the drainage system. And I'd be happy to speak with the member about any specific instances that he would like to bring to my attention. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kings North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the minister for that answer, and I would echo his comments on the local DTIR staff work very hard post this rainfall event. Very appreciative of how hard they worked. But I have many homeowners in my constituency who are deeply concerned about basement flooding. In many cases, these undersized culverts are a direct factor. Some basement flooding in one area happens several times each year, and this is particularly true in North Kentville and Governor Court Extension area, also in Centerville. So my question, will the minister commit to reviewing the culvert policy and helping these homeowners who are affected by these undersized culverts?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd be very happy to work with the member on specific areas where homeowners feel they might be affected by the infrastructure from the department. I'd be happy to do that. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Pictou Centre.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, anyone going to shop for groceries these days know the cost of a healthy diet. The importance of such a healthy, well-rounded diet is even more critical to those among us that suffer from health issues. We hear from constituents in our area that are among those that require specific dietary special needs. For those that are recipients of income assistance, the issue becomes almost impossible with the funding that they are eligible for under our present policy. Question to the Minister, does the Minister recognize how inadequate the present policy is with respect to special food allowances for our Nova Scotians on income assistance?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We want all Nova Scotians to be able to grow and thrive here in this province, Mr. Speaker, and that's why we do make provision for a special diet for people who do require it. Folks will have to have some documentation. It does not have to be from a doctor. It can be from a nurse practitioner, a dietitian, someone like that. But there is provision made for that. And of course, in January 2020, we are bringing in our standard household rate, which will be, when annualized, 3 times the largest increase to income assistance ever provided in this province.
The Honourable Member for Pictou Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister for that answer. Mr. Speaker, our hope and expectation is that even when someone finds themselves depending on income assistance, that there should be consideration for medically ordered dietary needs. $65 extra a month just does not fill that need for fresh, healthy food at today's prices. This leaves assistant recipients with tough choices. Do they take the risk of moving off their prescribed diets? Do they have to forego heat or prescriptions or other necessities? Question to the Minister, does the Minister think that the announcement that she just made with regard to January 2020 will be a reasonable allowance to enable people on income assistance to eat healthy?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
I'd like to thank the honourable member for the question. And to be clear, it is an announcement I've just made. We've previously indicated that this would be the start date for the standard household rate, so that our recipients will, in fact, see those changes on their check that comes out in late December. We've also made a number of other changes, Mr. Speaker, to income assistance, including but not limited to the doubling of allowable assets, the doubling of the poverty reduction credit, as well as allowing those income assistance recipients who are able to work to in fact keep more of the money that they earn. We do believe that this is helping to build income security for the people who do rely on income assistance.
Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Education is responsible for ensuring fair and equitable access to courses and opportunities for all students in Nova Scotia. For more than 2 years since we've been here, this government has refused to accept the fact that students from Cow Bay and Eastern Passage were going to be disadvantaged because the government was going to cancel and did cancel the school bus from our community to get those students to Cole Harbour High School who have to travel out of area to get the courses that they need. To my knowledge, no buses were cancelled in the Liberal HRM constituencies, and the bus count of around 303 buses in HRM has remained the same. My question to the minister is, can the minister tell the students and parents from my constituency why their bus from Cowbait Eastern Passage is the one route that I'm aware of that was cancelled, and when will he see correcting this inequality?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Neither the Department of Education nor the government decides bus routes. Right now, we've brought that back in-house in the Regional Centre of Education. Those are operational decisions that are made every single year. It did used to be the purview of stock. So I know that there have been some routing changes this year. In this particular case, I can get the details from the region for the member and make sure that she and her community receive them. But I'm sure the region has been proactive in communicating any changes to the community.
The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This goes back to who's responsible. According to Stock Transportation and Elwyn LaRue, it's you who's responsible, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. I'd like to remind the Honourable Member not to refer to members directly. The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to remind the members of this House that it's the Minister of Education who's ultimately responsible for where the buses run. Mr. Speaker, there are no skills trades classes or the International Baccalaureate program offered at Island View High School, so the students who want these courses must travel out of area. There is no public transportation for students living in Cowbay, and students living in Eastern Passage have to take a 75-minute bus ride to get to Cole Harbour High School with 3 bus transfers. The result is that the minister has left over 20 hard-working students in my constituency stranded. My question to the Minister of Education is, will he commit to coming out with me next week to take a drive on those buses, which may be inconvenienced because of the strike or the protest going on down by the bridge, which will impact the busing? And will he agree to meet with me next week to talk about a transit solution for the students from my constituency who've been stranded by this minister?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I'll remind the member that this government built a new school for her community, and perhaps that has impacted some busing routes. Now, part of building a new order, and part of the delivering of courses is contingent on student enrollment. So, of course,
please. The Honourable Minister of Education has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The member has misrepresented the facts in the process for course delivery and for transportation, so I do want to clarify that for the House and for her community if they're listening. The Regional Centre of Education makes those decisions. The operational folks, it was never in the purview of the school boards either. The operational folks make those decisions. In terms of course availability, that is contingent on student population. Same with transportation, Mr. Speaker. So when you build the new school for community like this government has done for the member, I wonder if she supports that decision or not. Perhaps she can get on the record for it, because she's given me very different opinions when she speaks to me privately, but perhaps we can get her on the record. That impacts the student population and that impacts the delivery of courses, but we will accommodate any students that do want to ensure that they can access courses if they want to transfer.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Lands and Forestry. According to a recent UN report, more than 1 million species are at risk of extinction in our lifetime. While I was glad to hear about the new protected areas announced on Monday, it is clear that there's still much to do. Nearly all the areas announced came from a list of almost 100 wilderness areas that were mapped, studied, and identified under the NDP government more than 5 years ago. And the remaining areas are also deeply important to Nova Scotians, and if protected, would help us meet and exceed the government's target of protecting 13% of our land mass, which is a target which I would suggest needs to move. Mr. Speaker, when will the government protect those remaining wilderness areas?
The Honourable Minister of Lands and Forestry.
Thank you for the question, and we share the concern that Nova Scotians have and the member has for the decline of species at risk in the province and across the globe. It is threatening numbers when you see 60% of the wildlife being reduced over the last 40 years in the globe. That's why we're taking action. The department actually hired an extra 2 biologists within the last year to focus on this very topic because it is of concern. We're updating our recovery teams. We continue to protect more land, as the member referenced. So the Minister of Environment and I got together and put together a list that had the most highest biodiversity values. 7,400 hectares of land was just protected, 17 sites with another 7,000 hectares on the way. So we continue to work hard on those sites. It's important to our government. We're going to continue along the list and make sure that we're looking at the areas that have those species at risk and the important habitat that needs to be protected. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax, Needham.
Mr. Speaker, one of the areas that the minister announced will be protected pending further consultation and survey work is the St. Mary's River. The Atlantic Salmon Federation, salmon biologists, and the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans have all said that protecting the St. Mary's River is key to recovery of the salmon population. And yet the gold company, St. Barbara's, is proposing to build an open pit gold mine in the area that would process ore, store toxic tailings, and draw thousands of liters a day from the St. Mary's River watershed. Mr. Speaker, if the government is concerned with protecting the important salmon habitat in the St. Mary's River, how can it at the same time entertain a proposal for an open pit gold mine that would directly threaten it?
The honourable member, Minister of Lands and Forestry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad that the member references St. Mary's River. It's an important piece that's in the next batch that we've committed to protecting. It just needs some work around surveying and such, and that's one of the reasons why it does take time. Once the land is put into the pending category in the Parks and Protected Plan, many of those sites were put in right before the election. The NDP put in before all that due diligence work needed to be completed. The public consultation needed to be looked at, but we are committed to protecting St. Mary's River. It is one of the largest corridors, over 30 kilometers of wildlife corridor within that space, so we're committed to that, and we'll have more news in the coming months. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Health and Wellness. Mr. Speaker, many nursing home residents are on medications provided by the pharmacy in blister packs, which are a safe way for residents in the home to get their medications. Many Nova Scotians have long-standing relationships with certain pharmacies to provide these blister packs. The same is true of nursing homes. They have relationships, often exclusive relationships, with a particular distributor. So my question to the minister is, does the department have a policy or agreement with the nursing homes as to where these prescriptions should come from?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for the important question, especially noting that this month is Caregiver Awareness Month, Mr. Speaker. The care and the safe support of our aging residents of Nova Scotia and facilities like this is of the utmost importance. With respect to policies for prescriptions, the rules around nursing homes are about the safety of the supplies and securing them and making sure the right people have the medications that are prescribed to them and that they're not accessible to other people, Mr. Speaker. Keeping them secure. Where they're actually procured, Mr. Speaker, is not one of the requirements we govern.
The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On July 29th, a lady from Waikagama in a nursing home in Shetticamp was transferred to Alderwood Rest Home in Bedeck, which was her home of choice. A week prior, she paid $188.58 for a 30-day refill of her medication in a blister pack. When she moved to Alderwood, she was told the home only accepted blister pack medications from a particular local pharmacy. As a result, this medication had to be destroyed and a new prescription obtained, as had been directed. Mr. Speaker, I recognize that this is a safety measure, and that's good. But it contributed to extra costs and waste to the province and to the individual. So my question to the minister, can the policy be changed so that any unused medication an individual might have upon transfer can be used with the proviso that the remaining prescriptions be filled at the home's pharmacy of choice?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe is aware of the the circumstances that he referenced when that occurred. I did ask staff to take a look at that and have some conversations with the various within the sector to appreciate and understand. I believe that particular practice is not at all facilities, so they've been having some discussions as to whether we can improve that process. Again, first and foremost, safety being front and center and the top priority, so that work and those discussions are ongoing.
The honourable member for Colchester, Musquedabbit Valley.
Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health and Wellness. A constituent of mine has been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Since the diagnosis, he's been desperately trying to manage his disorder for his health, wellness, and family. He's attempted to take his life twice now. A few weeks ago, I conducted a memorial service for a 37-year-old woman who succeeded in taking her life with the same disorder. For this gentleman, the ability to access appropriate treatments and services seems to be in a state of limbo. My question for the Minister is, without a family doctor, how can my constituent acquire referrals to the desperately needed mental health programs and services that he needs?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, we often have discussions about mental illness and the importance of mental health on this floor. And every member here, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure has been touched one way or another with loved ones or even perhaps directly with mental illnesses. The specific example of very acute mental illnesses, Mr. Speaker, people do deserve access to care. That's why we continue to invest, work to improve the delivery of care in our mental health services. Mr. Speaker, I assure the member for referral to services, there's a crisis line that can be contacted, Mr. Speaker, that doesn't need a physician referral. That if someone is in need, they can call and appropriate resources will be dispatched.
The honourable member for Colchester, Musquedabbit Valley.
Thank the Minister for that answer, and I know the Minister is very concerned about this. Ideally, my constituent would need the dialectical behaviour therapy. The constituent has, on his own initiative, already conducted his own inquiries into the treatment and available programs. However, it had been found that there would be a minimum 6-month waiting period to access this basic group therapy session. My question is, should he have to cope and manage his disorder for 6 months or more without mental health professional assistance?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member has a very specific constituent and circumstances in front of him, perhaps that's something, Mr. Speaker, I'd encourage the member maybe if we can touch base offline, we'll look into the very specifics and endeavour to work to ensure that this individual gets the care that they need, and we'll take a look at that and work with the health authority and our health professionals in mental health and addiction space. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cumberland North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I'd like to ask a question to the Minister of Health around the fact that taxpayers in this province are paying for empty long-term beds and empty residential care facility beds. Our continuing care organization takes an average of 10 to 12 days to get a patient moved from an acute care hospital bed to a long-term care bed. 10 to 12 days. And meanwhile, residential care facility beds remain chronically empty. In New Brunswick, there is a vacant bed recovery policy that prevents government and taxpayers from paying for a bed that's been vacant more than 2 days, and I'd like to table that policy from New Brunswick. My question to the Minister of Health is his department able to calculate the cost of to taxpayers of empty residential care facility beds and long-term care beds in the province and in Cumberland County in particular? And has the department looked at ways to create efficiencies to reduce the number of empty beds in the province?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, ensuring that residents of Nova Scotia who require long-term care supports and services is important for this government, indeed for all Nova Scotians. That's why I'm pleased that through the work of my predecessor, the current Minister of Community Culture and Heritage, during his tenure as Health Minister, took steps that has resulted in a reduction in our wait list for residents waiting to get access to long-term care facilities, whether they're waiting in community, at home, or in hospitals. Reduced the wait list by about half. The amount of time that they're waiting, Mr. Speaker, has also been reduced. And work continues, Mr. Speaker, to improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of our operations within that space.
The honourable member for Cumberland North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's very frustrating for healthcare professionals when there's empty beds and they know there's people that need those beds. For example, right now in Cumberland North, we have an 85-year-old constituent who's starting to have falls over the last 6 months. Recently, she has asked for help. So her and her physician have both agreed it's time for her to get some help. She wants to be independent, so they decided upon a residential care facility bed. Continuing Care have denied this senior, this 85-year-old woman, a bed, even though there are numerous empty residential care facility beds in Cumberland North. So I just want to clarify, there's empty beds. We have an 85-year-old senior who wants one of those beds, who's been having falls for the last 6 months, but yet she's being denied. My question to the Minister of Health is, will he commit into looking and investigating Continuing Care, how they're making the decisions, and why are they leaving empty beds while our seniors are looking for help?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. Indeed, I think it's important for members to recognize that there are a number of reasons why a bed may be at a particular point in time vacant. Sometimes, Mr. Speaker, in our facilities, a bed may be vacant because the resident is actually in an acute care hospital setting where they may have had to been transferred out, but that bed remains for the resident to go in. So, and as far as the specific circumstances that the member referred to, when individuals are assessed, I think the language the member used was an individual wanting access to a facility, but indeed, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that beds are available for those who need them. That is what we look at first and foremost as an assessment. I can't speak to the specifics of the case that she brought forward, though.
The honourable member for Sackville-Beaverbank.
Mr. Speaker, it's widely known that poor dental care can affect one's health, their ability to eat and maintain proper nutrition. Studies have shown connections between oral health and overall health, including heart problems, fever, diabetes, and pneumonia. The Nova Dental in Sackville recently held their second annual free dental day, where residents of Sackville, Beaverbank, and the surrounding areas could go and receive free dental services on the day. Due to the regular high costs associated with dental care, over 100 residents showed up to receive services at no cost. Mr. Speaker, my question for the Minister of Health is, for those Nova Scotians that are either youth or senior aged, or simply those not in financial position to pay for such services, what can the minister advise them on doing to be able to obtain basic dental care services?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for the question. Pleased to note that in January of this year, we expanded the dental services that the province provides, targeted, Mr. Speaker, targeted towards our youth. Mr. Speaker, the advice and research clearly shows that the types of services provided, particularly in the youth, is preventative in nature. So those were the services that we expanded, Mr. Speaker, based upon advice and feedback that we received from Dentistry Association.
The honourable member for Sackville-Beaverbank.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I certainly acknowledge that in January, the Nova Scotia government did expand dental coverage for children 14 and younger, and it's a decision that I certainly applaud. But based upon the facts that Nova Dental saw over 100 people for free dental services, we can see that there is still a serious need for dental care in our area as well as across this province. Creating a position of a dental or chief dental officer would certainly be a step in the right direction, Mr. Speaker. Somebody who would be able to expose the needs and the issues related to dental care in Nova Scotia. So my next question to the minister is, in the absence of a chief dental officer in this province, who acts as an advocate for dental matters in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As part of the work that we've been doing to improve our attention in the health space towards dental care and services, in addition to the expansion of programs and the dental health program in the province, we've also brought on staff a dental health consultant who works with us in a similar capacity as what I believe the member would refer to as a chief dental officer. Indeed, this is an individual with the clinical expertise, experience, and is working for the department on a part-time basis to provide that advice and recommendation to us.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton-Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the province of Nova Scotia offers seniors programs and grants to assist them with staying in their homes for as long as they can manage to do so. Assistance with household repairs and adaptations can improve the security and independent lives of our seniors. However, Mr. Speaker, at some point, many seniors weigh the costs associated with staying in their own home versus looking at affordable housing, with middle-class seniors finding their pensions insufficient to keep up with the cost of remaining in their own home. Right now, Mr. Speaker, there is a shortage of affordable housing in Nova Scotia, and in 2018, seniors made up 64% of those on the waiting list. The Housing Nova Scotia Business Plan for 2018-2019 outlines 4 priority areas for action. The #1 priority, Mr. Speaker, is to increase access to affordable housing by partnering with the private sector to build new affordable homes. Mr. Speaker, I ask the Minister of Housing Nova Scotia to please explain how many private partnerships have been created in Cape Breton-Richmond in 2018 and 2019 and are forecasted for 2019-2020, and how that has related.
The Honourable Minister of Housing, Nova Scotia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank the honourable member for the question. She's referenced a very important issue that we're aware of. We're very happy to have signed the National Housing Strategy, of course, which will allow us to implement things along the way. Part of that first 3-year action plan, Mr. Speaker, will be engaging the private sector as well as not-for-profits to help grow that affordable housing sector, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton-Richmond.
Mr. Speaker, access to affordable housing for seniors becomes an issue when they are forced to decide on a placement. And it's even worse when they have to make a decision not to be able to take with them a cherished member of their family, their pet, Mr. Speaker. Our nursing homes have acknowledged the importance of allowing pets in some facilities, and Elder Dog Canada are working with our senior population to help reduce issues with social isolation by offering support to seniors through programs such as dog care for seniors. So my question to the minister is, why is there only a handful of affordable housing available to seniors who wish to bring their pets along with them in the move?
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the question. We realize we will always have challenges, Mr. Speaker, with housing. We are doing what we believe is a good job working through the rent supplement program. Mr. Speaker, we will work with all ages. It doesn't matter if they're seniors or others, but seniors are certainly been a focus over the years. We'll continue to work with them throughout each of our municipalities right across this province. We'll continue to look at the programming. There are a number of things coming forward in the action plan that we're very excited about. We'll soon be underway. We're actually already doing a number of things where we're able to continue programs and services, Mr. Speaker, that were in place previous, and we'll continue to build new ones as we go along. And we're already in the middle of that now. We're in fiscal year 1. Money is going out the door. We're doing our very best, Mr. Speaker. We'll always have room to improve. We're doing our very best to help look after all of Nova Scotia.
Honourable Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Health. My constituent, David Austin, cares for his wife, Judith, who suffers from an advanced form of Alzheimer's. And I have, Mr. Speaker, a consent form signed by my constituent. He cares for her roughly 140 hours each week. To better break that down, that's 7 times the departmental minimum to qualify for the caregiver's benefit. Though initially receiving the caregiver's benefit, the expenses associated with this illness has piled up to the point that David made the decision to sell their family cottage to make ends meet. Based on this one-time sale, the Department of Health and Wellness revoked their $400 a month caregiver benefit. My question is this: can the minister please clarify, why are we penalizing Nova Scotians who are forced to sell their family property just to make ends meet in order to pay for home care expenses? Thank you, Mr.
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, as noted, the care and support and the opportunity and the valuable support that caregivers provide is noted by us as government. That's why we've expanded that caregiver benefit program, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that more Nova Scotians are able to take advantage of it. These programs, like many government programs, Mr. Speaker, are income tested to ensure that those who do need it the most receive those supports, Mr. Speaker, and that's the process we have in place.
Thank you very much. Order, please. Time allotted for oral questions put by members to ministers has expired. The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of order. The Minister of Education during question period stated that I made a different statement here in the legislature than what I say privately about educational
please.
opportunities in my community.
Disagreement of facts. It's not a point of order. Is it? Continue. The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Education has no basis to make that assertion. His assertion calls my character into question. I ask that he be directed to retract his statement and to apologize.
Sounds like a disagreement of facts to me. It's not a point of order. We'll now move on to government business. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before moving to government business, I rise to ask for unanimous consent of the House to allow for the Premier and the leaders of the opposition parties to speak to a matter of importance and, quite frankly, sadness for Nova Scotians. So with that consent, we'll move to hear from the Premier and the leaders.
Is it agreed? It is agreed. The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank all members of the House. As the House Leader said, following my remarks, the Leader of the Conservative Party and the Democratic Party will speak. And I would ask for a moment of silence. As we were in this House today, word became that Nova Scotia lost one of its true champions in the 20th Premier of our province, in Senator John Buchanan. Senator Buchanan began his elected life in 1967. Began leading the Conservative Party in 1971 and served this province as the longest-serving Conservative Premier, and then went on to serve this province in the Canadian Senate for 16 years. He's been often referred to as probably the best grassroots politician that this province has ever seen. The irony about Senator Buchanan was you thought he was, when you first met him, the way he responded to you and to your family and to the people around you, it was sometimes caught you off guard because he was just in such a spirit of life. But it wasn't because he was in elected office, Mr. Speaker. The last time I saw the senator, he still had that same energy and enthusiasm for life. I don't think anyone who sat in this House has been a truer champion of the values of this province and believing in this province. And if you had any opportunity, you weren't even sure where he was from. Because if you were in Sydney with him, he would remind you he was born in Sydney. But if you were in Bear River or in my constituency, he'd remind you Mavis was from Bear River. And he had connections all over the place. And he served the people of Halifax Atlantic, the new riding, in 7 elections. That's an extraordinary record for anyone. Whether you agreed with Mr. Buchanan's politics, no one can deny his belief in the best for this province and the people in this province. My father, my grandfather, is from Spryfield area, and Senator Buchanan would often tell me that my grandfather voted for him in 1970. And he would say to Mavis, you know, Stephen's grandfather was a big Liberal, and Mavis would look at me, so was Stephen. And then I would say to Senator, I'm not arguing, and I'm not disputing the fact that my grandfather might have voted for you, but I can guarantee he didn't tell my grandmother. And we would tell that story over and over again, every chance I got to see him. So I want to say to Mavis and to their 5 children, Thank you for sharing John with this province, giving him an opportunity to spend a lifetime of public service, whether it was in this chamber or whether it was in the Senate. John Buchanan always made sure that people knew he was from Nova Scotia and that Nova Scotia was his priority. So Mavis, to you and your family, I want to send you my love, the love of this caucus and the members of this House, and our deepest condolences to you on the loss that I'm sure is unmeasurable for all of you. I do want to just read one comment that in 2010, and I think this sums up Senator Buchanan. In a speech in 2010, he urged Nova Scotians to have more pride in their province. We don't do enough bragging about Nova Scotia. Many criticize it, he said. There can be too much pessimism in the media and elsewhere. Brag about the people, the resources, the entrepreneurs. Like the people here tonight, our heritage is the birthplace of New Scotland. Senator Buchanan was proud of this province, not just because he served in here, not because he was the 20th Premier of this province, but because he believed in it. And Mr. Speaker, heaven now has a new storyteller, and it will be alive tonight.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Premier, for those incredible words. We have lost certainly a great Nova Scotian for sure, and I know Premier Buchanan will be remembered by many as a very skilled politician and a masterful campaigner, but it really was his ability to connect with Nova Scotians that is his true legacy. And he was often late for events, and you know the reason. It's because he had stopped to talk to people along the way. Premier Buchanan led the PC party to 4 consecutive majority governments in 78, 81, 84, and 88. And he often used to say to me when I seen him since I was leader, he would say, "Tim, I hope you win 3 majorities." He was very proud of his 4 majorities. And he was Nova Scotia's 4th longest serving premier. And I believe he actually believed he was the 3rd. He had a technicality. There was a reason that he said he was the 3rd longest. But I will certainly remember John as a wonderful person and a masterful storyteller. His genuine interest in people meant that he never forgot a face and he never forgot a name, and he will be missed by many because his warmth truly was a magnet to people. And I know that quote that the Premier refers to. John was immensely proud of Nova Scotia, and he did urge every single one of us to brag about Nova Scotia at every opportunity, and he certainly did. Bragged about its people, its entrepreneurs, its resources. And my thoughts are certainly with Mavis and their 5 children. We also send as a caucus and as elected people, as Nova Scotians, our love to their family, and we do appreciate John's service and the fact that they shared him with so many people for so long. And I know that he is telling a story somewhere. He's probably singing about a place that he couldn't imagine. He couldn't imagine any place any more beautiful, more fit for princes and kings. And he would trade 10 cities for his Marion Bridge and the pleasures it brings. So, John, rest in peace, my good friend. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you. We in the New Democratic Party share the sorrow of the people of Nova Scotia to hear this morning of John Buchanan's passing. Mr. Buchanan's life touched so many different parts of the province, but none any more than the community of Spryfield, where after he had grown up in Sydney, he made his dug-in, permanent, lifetime home. Mr. Buchanan was an indefatigable advocate for Spryfield. And this included not just his many years as the member of the Legislative Assembly for the area, but also his long-time service in the community's institutions, including, I should certainly say, St. Paul's United Church, and also his service to the community on the hockey teams on which I and many others were privileged to play as a boy. No one in Nova Scotia, as has been said, could rival John Buchanan in social skill or in interactional, conversational skill. And his exceptional recall for the genealogical details about the life of the person with whom he was conversing is one I have never seen paralleled, and this did not leave him in his later age. So we in our party join all members of the House in extending our sympathy to Mavis and to John and Mavis's children, Murdoch and Travis, Nicola, Natasha, and Natalie. And so now let us stand together and honor Senator John Buchanan's memory.
I'd like to ask that all members please rise as we observe a moment of silence in remembrance of former Premier and Senator John Buchanan. Thank you. We will now move on to government business. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call public bills for second reading?
We'll now call public bills for second reading.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 169, the Expropriation Act?
We'll now call Bill number 169, the Expropriation Act. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that Bill 169, an act to amend Chapter 156 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Expropriation Act, be now read a second time. It's my pleasure to speak to this bill today. Mr. Speaker, these changes provide clarity to the legislation while also supporting investments in the major infrastructure projects that Nova Scotians have told us are a priority. Infrastructure investments for the public good, such as highways and healthcare facilities. While expropriation is always a measure of last resort, there are times when private land is impacted by infrastructure projects needed for the public good, such as highways, and claims for compensation come forward even when land is not expropriated. I know expropriation can be a difficult process, and Nova Scotians experiencing it want clear and fair rules. Mr. Speaker, the current legislation is ambiguous. We have an obligation to ensure landowners who are impacted by expropriation are reasonably compensated through clear and fair rules. They have a legal right to such compensation. Our goal is to ensure anyone impacted by expropriation does not suffer a financial loss. We also have an obligation to protect the interest of taxpayers and provide responsible fiscal management. To this end, it is just as important that a landowner impacted by expropriation does not profit from expropriation at the expense of taxpayers. Fair and reasonable compensation means that an impacted landowner will be compensated for what they are entitled to in terms of their actual financial loss. No more, no less. Mr. Speaker, the changes we are recommending will clarify what can be claimed through legal processes under the Act. We are also adding definitions which were not previously defined in the legislation. The changes will set clear parameters for eligible claims for compensation in certain situations. With this increased clarity, our hope is that these changes will reduce the need for litigation by landowners. Finally, these changes will bring us in line with jurisdictions across the country. Most provinces have been reviewing their expropriation legislation and are making or have made similar changes. The trend across the country is to make expropriation clear and easier to understand. Mr. Speaker, we are recommending several changes to the Act. First, we are clarifying that one of the purposes of the Act is for people impacted by expropriation to be reasonably compensated. The second change relates to disturbance losses, which are all reasonable costs, expenses, and financial losses a landowner incurs when their land is expropriated. With these changes, losses for disturbance damages must be quantified in financial terms and must be actually incurred by the landowner. Claims based on hypothetical scenarios of potential disturbances damages that may be experienced will no longer be permitted. The third change will require that claims must be directly linked to activity on the expropriated land. For example, a claimant cannot seek compensation for a possible personal or business activity which may have been considered into the future. This change aligns with other sections of the Act which provide losses to business for having to relocate as a result of an expropriation. Mr. Speaker, the fourth change relates to interest. We will clarify that interest may not be paid on claims for the period prior to the actual expropriation, which is the date that expropriation documents are filed with the Land Registry or the Registry of Deeds. Going forward, interest will only accrue from the filing date. Currently, some claimants have asked for and received interest for the period before the actual expropriation date. The final change relates to injurious affection where injurious affection claims where no land is taken. Going forward, these claims will be heard by the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia instead of the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board, who currently hear these claims. We feel disputes where a landowner is impacted but does actually have their land expropriated are best heard by the courts. These disputes are like other types of cases that the Supreme Court hears regularly, and they're best positioned to hear these cases. The courts are used to assessing evidence in these types of cases, and the process in the court offers opportunity for settlement conferences, as well as the ability for parties to get decisions on questions of law where there is a disagreement. Claims for injurious affection where land is actually expropriated will remain with the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. Injurious affection refers to a decrease in the property's market value caused by expropriation or to other losses a property owner incurs because of expropriation. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians have told us that infrastructure investments such as highways and healthcare facilities and services are a priority. To help advance these priorities, we need to ensure that the expropriation process provides landowners with fair and reasonable compensation while balancing the interest of taxpayers, ensuring responsible fiscal management, and more clarity to all concerned. And it's important to recognize, Mr. Speaker, that expropriation is in fact a course of last resort. These changes complement the ones made earlier this year to regulations. Through those regulations, we developed a schedule of fees for legal, land appraisal, surveyor, and other expert fees which are incurred by landowners experiencing expropriation. These amendments to the Expropriation Act will help ensure we have clear parameters in place to guarantee that landowners impacted by expropriation receive the fair and reasonable compensation they are entitled to, while also balancing the interest of taxpayers and ensuring prudent fiscal management. With those comments, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the comments of my colleagues.
The honourable member for Queens Shelburne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to rise and speak briefly to Bill number 169, the Expropriation Act. Mr. Speaker, let's remind ourselves what is at the heart of this act. This is about the government coming to take the land and property of private citizens. And as private citizens, we cannot stop them. All we can do is hope that we are fairly compensated. This is why I have concern about the amendments that the government is bringing forward, because it's the government getting to decide the standards of fairness and a process that they are party to. And these amendments, I believe, will actually make it harder for private citizens to be treated fairly. The purpose of an administrative tribunal like the URAB is to provide an affordable and efficient mechanism to mediate disputes. Individuals are able to advance and attend these informal proceedings in an effort to find a reasonable solution. It is a simple access to justice, Mr. Speaker. Something I believe that we all want to strive to achieve. At present, the first place to turn if you're unhappy with dealing with a transaction under the Expropriation Act is the URAB. You file a pretty straightforward paperwork and explain your position to the tribunal. The revisions of Section 5 and 6 of the Expropriation Act remove the involvement of the Utility and Review Board from certain disputes related to compensation. It makes it so that the first place to go in some situations is the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia. The court system is an intimidating place for most people. The process is very formal, and the rules of civil procedure are complicated and generally require the expertise of a lawyer to interpret to figure out the simplest of details, like what to file and when. While hiring a lawyer is not required, it is generally advisable, especially given that you will have the government on the other side, who come with no shortage of lawyers. This amendment makes questioning or challenging compensation much more expensive. It will take longer to resolve, potentially years in some cases, and it will clog up our already congested court system. At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, it is about access to justice. I'd like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak briefly to this bill, and I look forward to seeing what the good people of Nova Scotia will have to say at law amendments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable House Leader for the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise and say a few short words about the amendments to the Expropriation Act brought in today. We appreciate that the amendments were brought in with the intention of creating clarity. And I think we in the NDP caucus recognize that it's the government's job to create that clarity insofar as legislation goes. I think in general, my colleagues' points are well taken, that this does impact private landowners, and I think we need to be cautious about how we go forward. In general, I would say whenever we move the hearing of a matter from a tribunal to a higher court, there are access to justice issues that can immediately be engaged. It is harder to access those courts. Those courts are busier. But I won't opine on whether that's the right decision or not. I think our caucus is of the view that we really look forward to hearing from landowners and hopefully from some legal experts at law amendments. And I look forward to that process going forward. Thank you very much.
If I'm to recognize the Honourable Minister of Justice, it will be for second reading of Bill number 169, the Expropriation Act. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the comments of my colleagues. I do want to emphasize that the Expropriation Act is not new. This process has existed for many years. It has been a process that has had a lack of clarity for some time, and we know that both the courts and the UARB have sought clarity around the legislation. I'll refer specifically to the comments of my colleague from Queen Shelburne. I remember coming into government in 2013, and the then federal minister, federal member of parliament for South Shore St. Margaret's, Mr. Gerald Keddy, who my colleague was employed with at that time. Mr. Keddy and I had a number of discussions around the bypasses through Queens County that were critical to that community, and that expropriation took place at that time. to facilitate, Mr. Speaker, the development of that highway through those communities. And it really is, Mr. Speaker, about extending that same opportunity to every other area of the province where we see a need for public safety to expand and create and develop 4-lane highways, but also to find efficiencies, Mr. Speaker, for those communities who are involved. So it is a point where expropriation is a necessary process that has existed, and it is our intention, as my colleague from the NDP has stated, to provide clarity. The one comment that I will conclude on, because we have given this very close analysis, and because of the complexity of expropriation and land title, these matters always, in most cases, require legal representation. And legal representation, for the most part, is present at the UARB hearings as well. And although both of my colleagues have expressed a concern around access to justice and the need to secure legal advice should matters proceed to the Supreme Court, I would suggest to this House and to Nova Scotians that those circumstances presently exist. With those few comments, Mr. Speaker, I move to close second reading on Bill 169.
The motion is for second reading of Bill number 169, the Expropriation Act. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 169, an act to amend Chapter 156 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Expropriation Act.
Ordered that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will you please call Bill number 170, the Public Highways Act?
We'll now call Bill number 170, the Public Highways Act. The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that Bill 170, the Public Highways Act, be read a second time. It is a pleasure to speak to this legislation today. These amendments, Mr. Speaker, will improve the efficient administration of our highway system and to help our province better manage the public expenditure on our highways. As we can all appreciate, Nova Scotia's road and highway network is the backbone of our economy. It is integral to how the public and businesses move people, goods, and services across our province. So just as our highway network is important, so too is the legislation that supports it, Mr. Speaker. The amendments we are proposing in this bill will provide important updates and administrative improvements so that we can plan and manage our highway network better. The changes we are bringing forward today, Mr. Speaker, will also help bring our legislation in line with other Atlantic provinces. The two most substantive amendments I want to highlight involve simplifying the process for selling land that the province no longer needs and improving the process for reserving land for future road or highway expansion. Currently, TIR can identify or reserve land for highways for up to 5 years. The changes we are proposing will make it clear that the province is not responsible for compensating for certain types of improvements made to the land that add value while the land is reserved for highway use. These changes will also make it clear to prospective landowners that formal notification has been given and that any development agreements, zoning changes, or other improvements done to the property to arbitrarily enhance the value after notice is given will not be compensable by the province. This amendment will provide transparency and clarity to landowners whose land the province needs for a new highway. It will also help us engage landowners earlier in the process. I might just add that my department works very hard with landowners to achieve a positive outcome, Mr. Speaker. I think it is also important to note that the number of projects where landowners have been affected by this situation has been relatively quite small, just 2 instances in the last 5 years, Mr. Speaker. However, with the number of major capital highway infrastructure projects anticipated across the province over the next number of years, it is prudent we improve the legislation so we can manage costs appropriately and engage property owners earlier in the process.
As I referenced earlier, the amendments will also make it easier for the province to dispose of unneeded land remnants abutting old roads. And this is a very important change, Mr. Speaker, and one that frustrates the system because of the amount of red tape that generates. In Nova Scotia, we convey about 75 parcels of land per year to landowners who have property abutting old roads or severed parcels that are surplus to the province. Understandably, those lands are of interest to neighbouring contiguous landowners. Right now, much of the costs of the conveyance, such as surveying and other fees, are the responsibility of the buyer. That will change under this legislation. The authority to release the land will now be simplified through a certificate of release. This will ease the red tape and financial burden on the purchaser. The remaining amendments we are proposing are essentially administrative changes that will update terminology, include gender-neutral language, correct job titles, move fees to regulation, expand the way we notify the public about important information related to roads, and remove outdated provisions that are no longer practical. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I look forward to hearing from my colleagues across the aisle. Thank you.
The honourable member for Pictou Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to take a few moments to make a few comments about this particular bill, an act to amend Chapter 371 of Revised Statutes 1989, Public Highways Act. It's my understanding, Mr. Speaker, that this has been in place, I believe, since 1953. So, needless to say, it's time to scrutinize the bill and make some changes, in particular in the wording in the act, and updating the language in the legislation regarding job titles, etc. Mr. Speaker, changes will allow the province to sell or dispose of all historical highways no longer in use. I believe there's a word we use, ghost roads, for those types of historical roads that are not being used any longer. Updating notifications for road closures and spring weight restrictions. And many amendments that were updated and changed to improve, like the Minister had mentioned, highway expenditures. However, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure we probably could have even gone a little bit further in scrutinizing this particular act. And if we're truly going to modernize the Highway Act, then perhaps let's modernize it and do even a better and more of a thorough examination and bring the entire act up to date. However, Mr. Speaker, we'll support this particular piece of legislation and looking forward to law amendments. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We in the NDP are glad to see how the government is updating our ghost highways in Nova Scotia, and we look forward to hearing from constituents at law amendments.
If I'm recognized, the Honourable Minister of Transportation, it will be for second reading of Bill number 170, the Public Highways Act. The Honourable Minister of Transportation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank my colleagues across the hall for their comments. Mr. Speaker, I rise to close debate on Bill 170.
The motion is for second reading of Bill number 170, the Public Highways Act. Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill number 170, an act to amend Chapter 371 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Highways Act.
Ordered that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This concludes government business for today. I move that the House now rise to meet again Tuesday, October 8th, between the hours of 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. Following the daily routine and question period, business will include second reading of Bill number 175, the Marine Renewables Energy Act, and Bill number 177, the Public Utilities Act. And with time permitting, we will also have address and reply. I would also like to note for members of the House and the public that the Law Amendments Committee will be meeting Monday at 1 p.m. to deal with bills number 152, 160, 163, 166, 169, and 170. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The motion is for the House to adjourn to rise again Tuesday, October the 8th at 1 p.m. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye. Aye. Excuse me, contrary minded. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. The House now stands adjourned.